And I am the founder of the Metamorphosis Center in Savage. We're about 15 miles south of the Twin Cities, and we do all kinds of classes and workshops and topics related to mind, body, spirit, personal development. We have about 30 practitioners practicing out of our space, and now we are all online all the time. So we decided to do 40 consecutive nights of fireside chats where we invite in the most interesting speakers and practitioners that we've met along the years. Michelle is a favorite of many, so we're honored to have Michelle with us tonight. Michelle Ray, if you don't know Michelle, is the founder of the Center Within, and she's also an author of a book by the same name, Living from the Center Within. And she is truly a transformational life coach. I hadn't heard that word before I met Michelle, but basically she provides holistic life coaching to support personal, professional, organizational transformation. And that is the truth. So I think I will go ahead and share over to Michelle. If you haven't been on a Zoom call before, at the very top of the screen, if you're on a laptop or a desktop, there's a speaker view and a gallery view. If you want to see just the speaker, whoever's speaking, or if you want to see the images of other people that are on the call. At the very bottom of the scene, and I guess if you swipe left or right on a mobile, you can get the same choices. There's a little chat box in the bottom, and I'll be monitoring that chat box tonight in case you have questions that you'd like to ask along the way. I'll monitor those and try to weave them into Michelle's conversation, and we'll definitely open up for questions too at the end. But maybe Michelle, you've been talking a long time about this new era that's coming in your book, in your speaking engagements. Can you introduce yourself and this topic that you've been working on really since, what, 2017?
Yeah, thank you so much, Laura. And I just want to give you a shout out to our virtual and local community for all that you do to bring us together to have these conversations. It's really an honor, yeah, and privilege. And yes, I think many of us have been talking about this new era coming and the transformation that's afoot. And my book, Living from the Center Within, was published in 2017 after probably a decade of seeing clients and teaching at the University of Minnesota, where I teach in the Center for Spirituality and Healing. And many of us have seen the collapse of what's unsustainable in our old era that we're living in, and we're leaving and moving towards this new era. And I feel so blessed to connect again and again with students and clients and colleagues and people in our community that are very dedicated to their own inner transformation and are contributing to the collective transformation that's afoot. I was looking in my book a little bit before we met, Laura, and I pulled out this paragraph from this chapter 2 about transformation and the new era. And I just thought it really encapsulated your question and where we are. So just as a point of reference, here's a piece on transformation. Why, during times of rapid growth, such as extraordinary leaps in human consciousness occurring now, can we feel so disorientated? This is exactly how transformation happens. First, there are small incremental changes. Then chaos precedes big shifts as the decay of the old catapults us to the new. When nature reaches a limitation, it innovates and transforms, evolving towards higher consciousness and more freedom. Depending on your perspective, it can appear to be an ending or a beginning. And I think that that is our invitation, everyone on this call, everyone who lives their life on purpose, with intention, with some capacity to self-regulate and be emotionally intelligent, to be able to choose to be co-creating what we are becoming, as the subtitle of my book. And so to that end, I'll just give you again a couple qualities of the old era and the new era. And let's see if this resonates with you, right? Because inside us and collectively, we can see ourselves shifting. It can be our own inner beliefs, thoughts, or hearts, and noticing them is the first step. And we can recognize when our choices are based on worry, tightness. We can choose to step back and reflect and evaluate if our choices are coming from our fears and outdated beliefs, because we can actually intend and create our inner and outer experience with more trust and openness. So see if any of these resonate with you. Here's qualities of the old era next to the new era. And think about your own life. Where in your inner experience of your own beliefs, your own paradigms, and certainly we're seeing it in out loud here in the collective, can we move from depletion to sustainability, from secrecy to transparency, from exclusivity to inclusivity? Can we move from self-serving to mutually beneficial, from despising differences to honoring diversity? Can we move from honoring or valuing separation to interconnectedness, from blame and victim to responsibility? Can we please move from scarcity to abundance, from deconstruction to reconstruction? How about polarization? Have we had enough? Can we move to common ground, from greed to compassion, from antagonism to solidarity, discrimination to equality, violence to peace? One of my favorites, I can't wait to give up, entitlement. How about some mutual accountability? Moving from self-centered to mutually beneficially centered. So this is a chart, again, out of my book, and it's an invitation for us to have the conversation inside and in our communities to really invite us moving into that new era.
So Michelle, you've used a map basically to describe a person's path to living in higher consciousness. Tell me about these levels of consciousness and how does this level process really support the shift in this new era?
Yeah, it's a great question, Laura. And I think many of us are aware of a variety of maps, right? From, I think of one of the most famous, I think, is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? There's a pyramid, and at the bottom, if we don't have safety, if we don't have enough to eat, right, then that needs to be satisfied first. And once we can get that inner sense of security and trust, we can move up to a sense of belonging. And in that map, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're moving towards self-actualization. So the map that I use is similar, Laura, and they're all just pointing to the same invitation to develop to our maximum potential and not leave our potential unrealized. But the first level of development I use is when I, as an individual, identify that I'm me at the end of my skin and everything else is separate. And so I need to spend my time and energy and attention kind of protecting and defending my individual separate self. And I think that this is where we as a collective have an opportunity to move from. So here's some qualities of your self-identification as an individual. There's lack, there's chronic stress. Our main purpose is to heal our holes. Where are we deficient and how can we heal those? There's a lot of reactivity and distorted thinking, exaggerated fears, easily distracted. There's a lot of blame, hopelessness, hypervigilance, and a lot of judging and comparing. So that's this first level of development of I am individual. And what happens if we are paying attention on purpose in the present moment / living mindfully, we start to recognize oh my goodness, I'm interconnected. The air I'm breathing in and the oxygen that nourishes me comes from the trees. And the carbon dioxide I breathe out, that's food for them. And all of a sudden, I start to recognize in my own body that I feel great when I'm in my favorite place of nature. And I feel stress when I'm, I don't know, for me, it's at the Mall of America or Minnesota, right? But we start to recognize we have thoughts, feelings, even physical sensations that are interconnected. So we move our self-identity from, oh, I'm just an individual needing to be careful about everything else, to, wow, I am part of an interconnected web. And during that time in our development, and I am so optimistic that we as humanity have an opportunity to land at this new stage of consciousness, we work on becoming whole. How can I optimally function in all areas of my life? And what's really cool, I think, is we pop and we start to notice the non-physical interconnection, such as intuition, synchronicity, coincidences, right? We have much more curiosity than judgment. We can discern, but not add all this crazy meaning that's made up. We start to release our limiting beliefs that we were taught by people who were in fear, systems that were in fear. And one of the greatest reliefs is we can notice and release our inner negativity, our inner negative self-talk. We can genuinely enjoy the present moment and be more aware of amazing solutions and connections and relationships that arise literally out of the present moment. We start to expect miracles. We notice what we're grateful for. And there's a genuine acceptance of the tension of paradox, the differences. And we see it more and more as I just can feel it, like, can you sink into, wow, there's so much I don't know. There's people out there that are genius in these other areas, and I want to be a genius in my area. And then the third step on this map of human development is that I recognize that I am also holy. I carry the spark of the divine in me, as our Kabbalistic traditions teach, and Sufism teaches that the beloved and the beloved become one. In our Christian tradition, we say that the Holy Spirit lives in all. We have prana and chi, all these different names for describing this inner sensation, this inner realization that I am beyond interconnected at my core, part of this energetic holiness. So when we can dip into that place, we can begin to really understand how to live in the now. We're open to all possibilities. We genuinely are in service to the greater good. So imagine if every choice we made collectively and individually was about being in the flow. We have access to non-local realities. There's a great book by Lynn McTaggart called The Field that has all these studies. John knows about it. I mean, we can distant healing and distant prayer. I mean, all these types of things that are known, all these occurrences and experiences that are commonplace in the condition of recognizing this holiness. We really have access to a full gifts and strengths in ways of knowing. And we trust in this pure, undifferentiated awareness that from that ideas arise, and then we can bring them into our reality here on Earth for humanity, for the planet. But it comes from a different place. It comes from a different self-identification. And I believe that it is in accessing and living from these higher stages of consciousness that we are going to emerge on the other side of this pandemic with an understanding of who we are at a much higher level of consciousness, at a level much further along human development. So that's the map I use in my book. and in my life and with my clients and students and anyone else I can get to talk about it with me.
Well, let me pause before going to a new topic and see if anyone has anything they'd like to ask you or add to the conversation related to the maths or the new era.
I see we have a couple comments in the chat.
Yes. So one was for your book title, so I put that back out there.
Thank you. Great. Wonderful.
Okay, well, we can move into another topic then. I'm kind of curious, you talk about interconnection of the mind, body, heart, and then interconnection in the morphic and quantum fields. So maybe you can start by just telling us what the morphic and quantum fields are. And then what is science and what does spirituality tell us about that interconnection?
Yeah, John was just mentioning one of Lynn McTaggart's books called The Power of Eight. And one of the cool things that we've recognized is that when we come together in community with intention to be open to receiving new information, to supporting and encouraging each other, that there's something called a harmonic that actually emerges. It's similar to an orchestra or a quartet, right? When people have this coherence and attunement to each other, that out of that literally arises another level, another vibration. So when, go ahead, John.
Resonance.
Resonance, that's exactly right. There's another, if you're looking for resources, I enjoy the Power of Eight very much. There's a whole organization called Heart Math that talks about coherence and resonance. And they have done an extensive amount of research, Laura, to your point, on the morphic field. So what we know in quantum physics is that everything is interrelated at an energetic level. And it leads us to understanding that events can happen that are non-local. So for instance, I would ask anyone on the call, have you ever had an experience where you acted upon an impulse of information that was not coming in your immediate space and time? So maybe you have a dream about someone. Maybe you have an experience where somebody that you haven't thought about for a while comes to mind 3 times and you pick up the phone and call them, right? And that information is transferred, is connected, almost like fiber optic interconnected morphic field through the ethers, through that field where there's information shared that is often instantaneous and is undeniable. Another place that I have found fascinating to study about the quantum field is anything around quantum mechanics. There's this understanding that in the beginning, when we actually have a quantum physicist have told us that subatomic particles actually exist in this kind of undifferentiated condition. And what happens when they are observed, when they're in relationship with something else, they form either a particle or a wave. And I think that is true in the morphic field, that it's much, it's interdependent on our attention. And to your point, Laura, often in the body, we used to think, right, our physical body was just that. And then we had this, we kind of graduated as humanity and understanding our mind might somehow be connected to our body, our thoughts. And then Candace Pert's work and Bruce Lipton's works brings us into the molecules of emotion, right? And now all of a sudden we're recognizing, oh my goodness, we even have more brain cells in our gut than we do in our head. And how this interconnected, this chemical interconnection of the mind, the body, emotions, our heart, and our thoughts, and that's just inside of us. So that's one way that the morphic field works on our own interconnection internally. And then we have that same kind of constant call and response within the connection to all beings on the planet, Mother Earth herself, There's something called elementals, if you've never studied them, that are a quantum element in nature, and they respond to intention in a group and come forward and participate in creating matter. It's just a fascinating study. I'll give you two more things if anyone's curious. I've been sort of having an emotional and mental, I don't know, affair, I'd say, with something called neutrinos lately. They're these little tiny quantum particles that have barely any mass and barely any weight, and we have 100,000 of them going through every cubic centimeter in our body every second. And like, what is the purpose of neutrinos on the quantum field? We're just barely even being able to measure and recognize, for instance, neutrinos that have been around, obviously, since, I don't know, a long time. So what's fun for me is that as humanity, we are starting to understand the impact that our technology now can give us more information about that. And I'll just say one more thing about the mind-body in here that we know about the connection. And that is, if we are dumping poisons into our body through worry, through chronic stress, it literally eats away at the telomeres, the end of our chromosomes in our cells. We dump there's a chemical reaction of 1,400 chemicals that happen when we activate the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, right? We turn on our fight, flight, and freeze, our hyperarousal, or we turn on our relaxation response. And I've heard a couple different teachers, Christina Northrup, recently, I was listening to her, and she said the poison that we put in our bodies from fear and worry that is not actually happening in the present moment is more toxic, more poisonous than COVID-19 will ever be systemically in the collective. So how can we cultivate our capacity to not poison ourselves internally with the dumping of chemicals that are based on stress, that in our personal lived experience is not occurring? I could talk a long time, but I'll stop for a minute.
Michelle, we had Joan Steffen on a few nights ago, and she talked about the imaginal cells. Is that something you're familiar with? And that was a really fun conversation. I love the term, and I don't know if that's something you've come across as well.
I have talked a little bit around imaginal cells. I mean, it's from one of my backgrounds is in allopathic medicine. I'm a registered pharmacist by trade, and so all this stuff around stem cells, right? That's another physiological component of matter that just rests in an undifferentiated form. And then when our body needs a stem cell, that can be anything, it arises through our intention, the intention of our body, and then literally from an imaginal cell creates a differentiated cell based on the intention, based on the need. Think about that collectively. Maybe that's what Joan talked about. I missed her talk. She's such a wonderful human. What if we, as a collective, had these ready to move into reality opportunities, possibilities that we co-create because they serve the biology on this planet? What if every choice we made, from what we're going to produce for products to what we speak about, was in service of creating from possibilities, from imaginal cells, from stem cells, what optimally served all beings on the planet? Wow, what a powerful intention that would be.
Just catching up a little bit on the chat here. John had an interesting, I wrote this down. He's got a definition for worry is actively visualizing what you don't want, which that resonated well with me. Kind of going back one step, we have a question from Camille. Can you speak more about what it means to live in the infinite level? I think that goes back a bit, but I want to make sure we got that question for you?
My favorite way of describing the infinite level, to speak in a generic term, it's where the subject and object disappear into one. So for many of us, that first person lived experience happens when we are doing something we enjoy so much, we lose track of time, right? It's that sense of, there's not even me doing it and something getting done. It's just pure awareness, pure delight. Marathon runners or people that exercise talk about that, when they become the flow. It's not like we align with the flow, right? There's still a subject and object, but we are the flow. And another example that resonates with some humans is if you're making love and it's really good and you can't tell where you end and your lover begins, they're just in the experience. It's savory. You don't have to think about what to do next when you're running a marathon or you're in Minnesota planting our gardens. I mean, some people, like, you just forget to eat kind of thing. So it's moving into that. Many people experience it in meditation. We talk about nirvana, or moving into that place where you really almost can't feel your skin. You become so expanded. I know for me, in some of my meditations lately, I've been feeling into what feels to me like a heartbeat or a breath. It's just like this very quiet pulsing. And I'm not feeling it. I'm not sensing it. It's like living inside of me. I also have had the great privilege in these recent years to travel, and we've been in the Pacific Ocean. And I had an experience floating outside of the beach in Waikiki of imagining my body in the water, and pretty soon I couldn't feel it. And all of a sudden it felt like inside my awareness was all of the whales and dolphins and sea turtles and coral. So it's just like you're just breathing with it. It just all becomes you. And most of us, it's not advisable to live there 24/7, because I wouldn't drive a car in that condition, for instance, or, slice your apple. But when we have the opportunity to open fully into that sense of pure awareness, when our attention becomes more focused in the three-dimensional world, how we make choices changes based on our first person lived experience, that we are all one. There's work on unity consciousness as another language to describe it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I hope that gives some examples.
No, that's helpful. When you talked about all the different qualities of the current era versus the new era, how do we transition between those? Those are kind of polar well, not always, but a lot of them were kind of the extremes of a concept.
Right.
How do you get your way across the new era?
So the short answer is every single time you make a small choice, decide if it's coming from fear or it's coming from love. What I'm going to put in my body, who I'm going to spend my time with, what I'm going to create, what I'm going to watch on television. So if we can just, in our daily life, with one small choice, after one small choice, decide. And for me, anyway, sometimes I make that decision with the rest of me, like my resistant part, my fear-based part, my you've got to be effing kidding me part. Like, it has to come along. It's not like one or the other. We have a little bit of our feet in both worlds, let's say, right? There's part of, but who do we give? I call it my allegiance. Who gets to decide? Because all of these aspects of myself, my concerned self, my, oh, you're getting too big for your britches self, my, all these 8-track tapes, for those of us who are old, right? They're still on 8-track tapes. Like, who brought those along, for heaven's sakes? But they're there. but the parts of me that are living in fear are constricted and feel resistant. They don't get to vote. I want them at the table. I don't want them self-sabotaging me, but I am not going to give my allegiance to my choices to the fear and the constriction. And what I have found happen over time, the more and more I practice this, making decisions from love, the yes, it is yours to do and move forward with that. And the no's, like that's old era stuff, become more clear. It used to be for me that I wasn't sure, should I do this or not? Should I do this or not? You know, just like whatever. And now it's like, oh, for sure, this is a yes. And you know it unequivocally. And then I just have to wait until I can talk enough of myself into actually acting on it. And sometimes it takes a while, you know, sometimes I'm like, I'll sleep on it. I'll see if it's still a yes in the morning, you know. And again, the no's. I mean, there's definitely been some things I've made decisions to leap into what seemed semi-insane, you know, but I knew it was time to, for instance, leave a full-time job with 6 figures. Who does that? Well, I can barely, like, you know, oh, it's a little uncomfortable. It's probably time to move on. I got a little more uncomfortable. It's maybe for sure time to move on. And then there's the, oh my gosh, I got a contract to do some contract work. Well, you know, and then it's like, you know, if you wait long enough, you just get fired and then you have to. But you know it's a yes, you know what I mean? And you get to take your time, and we have to bring ourselves along, and it needs to be integrated. But the clarity of yes, the more we say yes to the new era, the clarity of knowing becomes much more, it's like a positive reinforcement.
Very helpful. I'm going to take another break here and see if anyone wants to ask a question. You're welcome to type them in the chat room too here, and I can read them. I'll pay better attention this time when I ask and then just move on without reading the chats. But what are you experiencing out there? What kind of things related to what Michelle's talking about are you working through or questioning these days?
I have something. So I know at least 2 of us on this call today have lost our jobs in the last couple of days. And so I guess if you would just talk a little bit around the subject of imagining what's next, you know, bringing into being what's next, and then maybe even partly balancing the grief of what we're leaving behind, and just the whole subject of a forced move, you know, out of, like you said, if you wait around long enough, they fire you. So just talk on that process.
Sure. I appreciate that you, the first part of your question is about imagining, right? So let's say you have more of a clean slate than you did before. So as you imagine, I kind of think of it as very divergent thinking. What would it feel like? What would it feel? What do you want your daily routine to look like? Are you working with people or not? Are you staying home or not? What kind of service industry would you like to be in? What's a topic you'd like to learn more about? How does it feel in terms of autonomy or group work? How does it feel in your body when you wake up in the morning and you can't wait to go to work? Like, what would that feel like inside of you? I know in my own life, one of the things I'm doing at 58 this year, I think I am. I can't remember, something like that. But I think about the next decade, and one of the things I'm imagining for myself is to do more work that doesn't require me to be in a particular place. So I've taken steps to make that happen. I've learned about Zoom. I've hired a virtual assistant. I've created some online courses. I've actually taken some steps that align with what I'm imagining. I think about what I'm imagining, that I am standing in the middle of a beach ball, and I can see the end of the beach ball has all these different options. I look this way. I don't know. One of the examples I might use is I want to run a marathon, right? Or I want a job in this area. So I look out there and I can see that at the end of a timeline, at the end of like a rope that I might walk on a trapeze. And then I go inside, I call people, I do an informational interview, I go online, I whatever, maybe get a certificate in something. I take these actions that are in alignment with what expands me, what I love. And when you do that and you walk down that timeline, the center of your beach ball rolls. So that what you're moving towards becomes more likely to become manifested. So in your case, you know, with those of us losing jobs, to think about who your network is. What do you want to ask them for? Do you want information? Do you want training? And that this is the coach in me, right? We want to do SMART goals that are specific and measurable and actionable and have a time frame. But if you move down that timeline, the coolest thing happens in the interconnected dimensions. You put it out on the morphic field, like you get clear about your intention. You put it out there, you take these steps, you move down this timeline, the whole beach ball changes. And now all of a sudden, your cousin's uncle's girlfriend says to you, oh, I hear that you're interested in a job in, I don't know, changing the world in this way, right? And that comes into your life, comes into your awareness because of the action you took. So you literally create new possibilities to support you in finding a new job that didn't exist before you took those steps. So it feels a bit miraculous and synchronistic and intuitive. And yes, it is, because in the morphic field, it's responding to your clear intention. You asked me a second question and I got off on a tangent and I forgot. Tell me again.
Sorry, well, I'm actually not sure. I think it was, I think you answered everything I asked.
Okay.
I think you clumped them together nicely. That
Okay.
was lovely, thank you.
My brain sometimes works that way. Thank you. Great question. What I'm loving about the conversation and the questions, this is very practical. I mean, I get really irritated with people that, you know, think this is woo-woo. Are you flipping kidding me? You think the world is woo-woo right now? The world is looking for people who are awake and empowered and understand they're not victims, right? And we have choice. And if each one of us, it's like being invited to the orchestra. You know, we're the orchestra of humanity. And this thing, this body, our thoughts, our heart, this is our instrument. So clean it up, right? Polish it, practice. But we want you, every single person on this call, to be contributing to this shift in humanity, ushering in the new era with your full capacity, like all of your breath, you know, through your flute or however you want to think of your instrument. And we want everyone in the orchestra to have their best, most optimal capacity turned on. We're not going to go around saying the violin is more important than the, you know, oboe is more important than the percussions. For heaven's sakes, we've tried that. It's failed miserably, you know? So first we start inside. Clean this up, play your instrument, shine, figure out what blocks you, figure out what keeps you from your full shining. And then, as Marianne Williamson said in her poem, you know, us being in our power invites others to do the same.
Yeah, there's a nice definition coming in here from John again on intention: short, specific, positive, and present tense.
Right.
I like that.
And I'm going to offer one more caveat. Get clear about your intention. And when the universe sends you what you're asking for in the most phenomenally flooded, miraculous way, you don't get the option of saying, just kidding. You say, yes. And you call your people and say, holy buckets, this a miraculous thing happened and I don't know if I was really ready for it. You set your intention, get specific. You say yes. Give Laura or I or any of the rest of us a call.
Don't act surprised. Yep.
It's shocking sometimes the way it comes in. So just pay attention. Yes, Amy.
I have been loving everything that you've said so far. I totally resonate with it. And I heard another webinar thing, and in terms of like moving from the three-dimensional to the quantum, the next, higher levels. And for those of you out there who are energy workers or know about the chakras, this person explained, and I've known this, but just kind of hearing it in this way and doing other work, it makes sense to me. But our lower three chakras, are much more in the three-dimensional, kind of the earth, plants and animals, people. I mean, this is kind of how you get grounded, right? And then we have the heart chakra, and then we have the fifth, sixth, and seventh, which tends to elevate us more into the spiritual plane, little higher dimensional things. And in the middle is our heart. And kind of, moving from lower dimension into higher dimension is coming back home, coming back into our heart and, really using that unconditional love and to help obviously access some of these other fields and places. So, and I just, yeah, so it just was interesting. I mean, it's stuff that you kind of know, but at the same time, it's like, oh, yeah, this is really a really good place to kind of start if you don't know where else to go as well. It's kind of said, what does our heart have to say? Because our connection, obviously, the higher stuff comes through that. So
Right.
That's just all.
Thank you, Amy. You're absolutely right. The heart, the vibration of love, literally, from a physics perspective, is the highest frequency we know of in this dimension. So to radiate that, that's why the heart math practices, right, of gratitude brings coherence and resonance. And one of the other cool things that Amy's bringing out that I really love about the model is that our body, we don't transcend it when we move into interconnected. We don't move from individual to interconnected and leave individual behind. Exactly what you're talking about with the chakras, they're all here. So we not only keep our own physical body, mental body, emotional body, but in addition now, it takes on a different perspective. It's kind of like a goldfish going from being in a little goldfish jar to being in the ocean. The goldfish doesn't change. If anything, we physically need to feed ourselves. We have to be more emotionally and socially intelligent than ever before, because as we ascend in our expansion, it always includes the other levels. They just shift in in our understanding and perspective of them. And to Amy's point, one of the cool things I see happening with this fifth dimensional consciousness or ascension process, or however we want to think about it, I think what I'm actually seeing in my meditations is we have 12 chakras. And as we are expanding who we are as a first person, we are now embodying these higher chakras that previously felt like they were outside of our capacity, physically, biologically, might kind of make us sick or blow us up or something, I don't know. But as we are increasing our physical biology frequency, we are now becoming able to, attuned to a frequency that we can embody even more chakras in our first person experience. And I see them as iridescent. They're different colors. They're kind of pearlescent, and they're coming right in. And there is almost like a third dimensional heart, you're saying, and then there's a fifth dimensional chakra that contains the third dimensional chakra, and they're now working in tandem inside of our awareness. So I'm going way out on the esoteric. So for anybody who says, "Oh my God, she just lost me for sure," just a little sprinkling of something way out there.
Anyone else would like to contribute or ask a question or share? I'd kind of like to build on Rebecca's question in a way, in that, Michelle, you're a great visionary and dreamer. So what's your vision for the optimal outcome for humanity after this COVID-19 and we're past the fear and into the new era? What's on the other side of the pandemic?
I think optimally, we move into this interconnectedness, right? We understand the value of all of the diversity of every plant in the kingdom, of every mineral in the kingdom, of every race and religion and ethnicity and idea, right? And that we move from this protective, anything different than me is, I need to oppress, let's just say, to stay safe, that we move into this real honoring of interconnectedness. I see that we have on this planet everything we need for sustainability, from food to water to, the resources, there's enough resources on this planet. If we can move together to create systems, and they're every system. I look at education, right? I teach at the University of Minnesota, and I know from that, as well as the K through 12 and my friends who are teachers. For instance, in the old era, it was like, I will walk out the door if you make me use flat classrooms, if you make me go online. You can't make me, it's against my union contract. I won't, blah, blah, blah. I don't know of a single person at the University of Minnesota that, by the way, has been forced to do 100% of our classes online. I don't know of a single professor who staunchly held that belief that has walked out. And you know why? Because they care about their students. Are they kicking and screaming and so pissed off about having to learn online? Absolutely. Has any of that changed? Absolutely. But their motive is no longer based in fear of change. Their motive is, what can I do for the greater good? And I see that right down the line. So whatever you're interested in, if you're interested in politics, quite frankly, in this country anyway, if you were good at walking across the aisle and actually co-creating, you were discouraged in sometimes not very subtle ways from running for an election, at least in the two main parties, right? We have the systems I have in healthcare. There are, for instance, there's some sound healing out there that works on virus that is prevalent in other countries, that was banned in this country because it had such high level of curing cancer in the 60s that it was banned in this country. And it's back around. So we have all kinds of technologies that have far transcended the current allopathic healthcare system in this country, that are double-blinded, absolute known to keep us healthy, not just work on sickness. So what if around the country, all the studies on how we can best support ourselves biologically from a healthcare system were actually brought to the forefront? I actually heard an interview with someone on the CDC, one of the physicians that's been online quite a bit, from a doctor saying there's great protocols of getting COVID-19 and then diminishing the length of time and the intensity from some of these homeopathy and IV and vitamin C. Could you speak to those? Will we bring them to this country? They're very well studied. And the answer back was, we absolutely will not. They don't fit our paradigm, right? So we have in from commerce to finance to arts to how we treat the environment, right? So I see us transcending this separation, this individualism, this protectionism, and moving towards cures. There was an interesting conversation among 3 scientists from 3 different countries, the US, China, and Pakistan, I think it was, that talked about sharing resources that had never communicated before regarding moving towards understanding COVID-19. And the reason they wouldn't share before is because they were competing for the same international dollars, right, for their labs. So here we spend money over and over and over to discover the very same thing, because our system is set up to promote competition at the expense of humanity, people. So there's occasion after occasion after occasion that we are seeing that we are leaving behind the old constricted, old era ways of thinking and doing things, and having tremendous success on the other side. And my invitation to every one of us and anyone who's willing to join this conversation is, let's keep it up.
Go ahead.
Is there any version of capitalism that could survive in this next era?
Absolutely. I'm going to go beyond capitalism. Here's what I think happens in the new era. I think that the old era was about karma, if you're familiar with that, right? Or capitalism at the expense of. It was about oppression. It was about scarcity, and there wasn't enough, right? And so we were constantly learning about things. So for instance, around karma, we are hardwired physiologically, neurologically, to have a propensity anywhere from 6 to 10 times longer remembering if something negative happened, in order to teach us to not do that anymore, okay? What I think is happening in the new era is it's flipping 180 degrees, and we are going to be rewarded from a neurological perspective, to hiring for jobs, to choosing a partner. If you bring out the best in me, if you say to me, your genius, what's your genius? And we're going to support it. Imagine going into kindergarten, rather than here's the rules, and when you mess up, you'll go to detention and learn what not to do. And then, yeah, good luck with the rest of it. What if we flipped it? And 100% of the people supporting children entering grade school was, what's your genius? Do you like to sing? Do you like to dance? Do you like to write poetry? Do you like to do math? Do you want to figure out what to do with all the flipping garbage we have floating on the earth, buried in the earth, I'm thinking I went to Hawaii, right? There's 7 miles of a floating trash out there, and that's just what we can see on the surface. So to your point, Rebecca, let's use capitalism to say that's part of it. Part of the formula is, are you brilliant? And yes, we want an exchange, right? You give us your invention and I'll give you mine. Back to the orchestra. I'm going to contribute to my genius, and everyone around me is going to insist, really. This is moving away from entitlement, where I don't need to contribute. I don't need to be my best self, and I'm entitled to X, Y, and Z. It's the opposite of that. So capitalism at its best it's a reward system. It's a way we exchange energy, money, but we're rewarded for being amazing. Get me started here.
Tagging onto that, coming from the chat, from Camille, as you say, there's an incredible opportunity right now for human transformation through the experience of this virus. How do we help overcome the forces that may resist this incredible moment for a major paradigm shift?
Well, Greg Braden says, I think the statistic I read was 3.1% makes the shift. You know, there's some mathematical formulas around quantum. All we need to do is have what did Mother Teresa say? A small, committed group with an intention is not only how the world changes, but it's the only way it's ever changed. So we need to find each other. We need to do chats like this. And we need to create a new normal, to stabilize a new normal in our community, in this 3%. We need to embody it. We need to have automatic decision-making. We need to make this our new habit. We need to recognize when oppression happens and say, wow, that's one way to think about it, but we've tried that and it didn't work. Let's think about it in this perspective, right? So the way it's going to happen is if we get it embodied, integrated into our ways of thinking, into our own belief systems, into our own self-worth, for heaven's sakes, our own self-love, our own self-compassion, then we can offer that to another. We can only love another person or the planet to the level that we love ourselves, for instance, or have compassion, right? So it starts at home. Work on ourselves, do our practice. Think of all the transformative practices that are available. Breathing, meditation, music, silence, feng shui, body movement, being in nature, contemplation, ritual, all these ways that we practice. Do it yourself, do it in community, and have your people, have it be your new normal, our new normal, and then it will ripple out. It isn't going to take the majority to make the paradigm shift. It's just going to take this critical mass, and finding each other is essential.
Great. So these hours go so quick, but we're just coming around to 8 o'clock here. Michelle, is there any parting comment or thought you'd like to leave us with?
You know, I think that we're all invited to find the balance. Another whole topic we didn't even touch on is the rebalancing of the masculine and feminine, right? We've been overly patriarchal. So the divine feminine, so find this balance between the inner, receiving information, being in conversation at all your multidimensional selves, receiving and then expressing in your art, expressing in your work and service, expressing in the way that you communicate. This balance of inner reflection and outer expression. There's a balance between profit and people. Could we be having more, what's the right word? Explosively transparent conversations, right? Is it profit or people? We're moving towards and, right? It's an and. And what is the optimal formula for sustainability for all? So find it inside, find your balance between beingness in this time during COVID-19 where we have extra spaciousness. Don't fill every moment. Be mindful of your distractions. Find a new normal with your own inner comfort, your own inner love and worth. And let the doing that arises, let your choices of love in action come from this powerful self-knowing, this powerful inner awareness. And then be an example. We don't have to slam it down anyone else's point of, this is not about oppression. We are not going to oppress people with a higher point of view. We're going to live it. We're going to be it. And you'll be surprised. I would be shocked if we could have an entire conversation, I'm sure, with everyone on this call that says, people walk up to me regularly and say, how do you live that way? Right? Be the expression. Be light and love radiating on the planet. Let your presence in the morphic field speak for itself.
So many good things to think about. Thank you so much, Michelle, for being here tonight. And at least I can connect everybody on this call with your website tomorrow. So I will send the replay out of tonight's conversation tomorrow to everybody that's registered and on the call today. And just thank you so much, Michelle, for your time and your information. You know, it's nice. It's been nice for me to know that this hour at night is kind of like reserved for me and my own healing and education on how to move forward. So thank you. Tomorrow night, we actually return with Tammy Briggs, who is a therapeutic harpist, plays the most beautiful harp music ever. She'll be playing tomorrow night from 7 to 8 to give us all a little bit of peace and calm and hopefully put you to bed on a Sunday night. And I did want to make one public service announcement. So Ginny was talking about this before the call started here today, but tonight is a worldwide global meditation that starts at 9:45 Central Time. It sounds like it's 20 minutes long, and that you can do it on your own or on Instagram or Instagram or Facebook. Under Unify, you can find a group of people doing it together. So thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. And thanks for the great questions and comments, and stay healthy, and let's all move forward together.
Thanks, Michelle. Good job.
Thank you all. Mwah.
Thank you. Very good. Loved
Great
it.
to see all of you.
All right.
Bless.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.